his family has this house in Nantucket that we like spending.
Oh, that's right. You're right. I always
spending
see you
time.
post about Nantucket.
Yeah.
That's so funny. I was just thinking, if Ted has Find My iPhone or Track My Friends, he probably sees you at a divorce lawyer's office and he's freaking out.
Oh no, he did know. Well, I
Oh,
think
did
he
you
knew.
tell him?
I think
Okay.
he knew I was
Did you tell him I
coming
wear
here.
2 hats? Because he could track it. He's like, oh my God, she's at the lawyer's office. This is it.
I'll be sure to tell him where.
Oh my gosh, that'd be funny. He's like, I just saw you there. I want to talk you out of it. Okay, everybody, welcome to the 3rd episode of I'll Call My Guy. Today I have a very special guest. I have the Queen of West Hartford, as I like to refer to, as Ronni Newton. Ronni, thank you for coming.
Well, thanks so much, Rich.
So you are, as my people would sometimes say, you're obviously a fantastic reporter. You report on everything, everything's there. My grandmother would probably say you're the town yenta, but not in a pejorative way, but a good way. Like you're sharing good. You do it and I mean that with all respect and in good things. Like you get information and you relay it to the town. Are you a West Hartford native?
I'm not. I'm about to have lived here for 26 years.
Wow.
So, but in terms of West Hartford people, that's far from being a native.
That's right. Right. You didn't.
My husband grew up here, though.
He's a Hall or a Connard?
It's actually Kingswood.
Oh,
he lived in the
KO.
Connard district, but
All right.
but
All right.
graduated
Yeah, Sydney
from
in our
Kingswood.
office here is a KO person as well. As is Mike Mahoney in our building. I don't know if you know Mike.
He went to KO with Mike Mahoney.
Class of 81.
Class of 80, but they knew each other.
Yeah, he told me that today. That's how I know. I don't have that kind of memory, but that's cool. So so where did you grow up?
So I was born in Port Chester, New York, actually,
Okay.
but my parents were both from Westchester, and I grew up in Stamford. Moved there when I was 2, so really most of my
So you're a nutmegger. You're a Connecticut,
I am
right,
I
from
am.
birth. Okay. And so you went to high school in Stamford?
I went to West Hill High School in Stamford.
Okay. And then what did you do? Like, so tell me about your folks. Just a little background. Were your folks an intact family through high school, or?
Yeah. So my father was in the human resources personnel business for most of his career. My mother was a secretary, and I have a younger sister who actually lives in West Hartford now.
Oh, nice.
And we grew up in the same house, on Amherst Place in
that's so
Stamford
nice.
from the time I was 2 until, my father sold that long after I was married, had children, and had moved to West Hartford. But so I am married to somebody who's also from Connecticut, but we actually met in college in North Carolina.
Oh, I was going to ask you that. So college after high school, where
Yes.
did you go?
I went to Duke University.
Oh, Duke. Oh, yeah. Blue Devils.
So absolutely.
All right.
And,
So do you? But now you're a huge UConn fan.
I am a huge UConn fan, but it was not an immediate.
Where were you for that Christian
allegiance.
Leitner mess? Remember that?
So 1991.
That's right.
Living in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
Which is where my husband and I lived when we first got married. We actually lived down there for almost 14 years.
Oh, so let's talk about that because I lived in D.C. We overlapped.
Oh,
I went to
okay.
American.
Oh, okay.
So you go to Duke. Where does your husband go?
He went to Duke also.
Oh, did you meet in college?
We met in college.
Wow.
We initially met, actually, and this will circle back to what I'm doing now, working for the Duke Chronicle, which is the daily newspaper. I had no aspirations at the time to be a journalist. I just enjoyed that industry. Duke didn't have a journalism school, but I actually answered an ad for a work-study job, and it was typing the classified ads. And I thought, well, I don't want to work in food services, and I, needed a job though to pay my tuition, which at the time was ridiculously a small number compared to
now it's
compared to
$80,000
now.
or something, right?
Yeah, no, it was under $10,000 a year. But I still needed that work study job.
I did work study. I loved it.
And I got a job working for the Chronicle, and then I also started doing some reporting for the paper in addition to my job.
So this started at an early age, 18, 19 years old, probably.
20.
20.
I was 20.
20 years old, and you're reporting.
We were both 20. No, so we working for the school newspaper.
No, but I'm saying,
Yeah.
but it was your first sort of taste of reporting.
Yep.
Granted, it's not you're not dealing with as large of issues as you are now, but it still was. Was your husband, you said, doing that as well?
So he just for fun was also working as a reporter for the paper, and he actually was trying to. It's kind of a funny story. He was trying to make a phone call to the U.S. Capitol. He needed to reach a congressman for a comment on a. I don't remember what story he was working on, and he came into the office, and I was the only one there. I was working on the classified ads,
Right.
and it was just one afternoon, and I happened to know off the top of my head the phone number for the Capitol switchboard, and I also knew how to make a long distance call, which was not a simple thing from the newspaper offices. And I was the only one there. So he said, I'm trying to make this call.
Remember the number still?
Uh,
202.
No, it was 202. It was something like 525-3000.
Well, I used to memorize, I think the White House was 202-456-1414. We used to memorize that because I always would say if something bad happened to me or we were hijacked or something, I'd call the switchboard and be like, get the president. I need to talk to him. We're under attack or something.
That's funny. I wish I did remember it.
It's 202 for sure. But yeah, you're right. There's a main number and they used to answer and they would transfer you. I remember that. This was probably late in the 80s?
This was, it was early 80s actually, believe it or not. So I'm going to give away my age.
That's all right.
But the reason I knew the number is because I had been working in the district office for my congressman and had applied for a summer internship.
Who was your congressman then?
At the time, Stuart McKinney from the
Fairfield
4th
County?
District in Fairfield County.
Okay.
And I was going to be going to work in that office the following summer. So I had made enough calls there that I actually had still remembered the phone number. So that's how we first met. And that was in December of my junior year, his sophomore year in college.
So were you just friends at the time or did you start dating right away or?
That's again a little bit of an interesting story.
Interesting.
No, we were, we just met. We were acquaintances,
Right.
really. And then I met him again a couple of weeks later when I was giving my then hometown boyfriend a tour of the of the newspaper office, and he was there, and there was a little chemistry right away, and I kind of tried to avoid him, but he, said hello to me, and then my hometown boyfriend goes back to his own college, and
then he makes the move.
and then I ran into was introduced to Ted again at a party by a mutual friend of ours, and the rest is kind of history.
Wow. And where did Ted grow up? What town?
He grew up in West Hartford.
Oh, so
Yeah.
that's right. You said. All right. So he was in West Hartford. Oh, that's right. You said that. The KO. So he was here, finishes at KO, heads to Duke, and you guys are in the same class.
We were actually one class apart.
Okay.
So we were born the same year, but he'll be happy to tell you he's I'm a cougar, I guess is what he likes to say. He's not quite 6 months younger than I am.
Okay.
But we were born the same year, but I say he failed Sandbox. So his birthday's in November, so he started school later.
So he goes to he's at Duke. You when you finish Duke, what do you guys do?
So I finished first. I
Right.
graduated a year earlier, and I'd actually been planning to go to law school and had worked for a lawyer the summer before I had worked for Congressman McKinney. Really thinking that was what I wanted to do, and I took the LSATs. I'm not a good standardized test taker, but I nailed those LSATs, and wrote this essay about. I quoted Plato and Socrates. I used to remember a lot more
They
things
love
back
that. The
then.
admissions committee eat that stuff. Okay.
But I filled out my applications, and then I just decided that I just was so done with school at that time, and I just needed a break, and I really started doubting whether or not that was what I wanted to do with
And
my career.
what is your degree in?
Political science and economics.
Okay, all right. So, and how about Ted?
His degree is psychology and political science,
Okay,
and he picked up the political science because I was studying it, and he kind of liked it.
okay. And then, so you finished first. So where do you head then? You applied for law school, but you didn't go there.
Well, I changed my mind. I didn't even actually apply.
Oh, you
I
didn't
changed
apply,
my
but
mind.
you were getting ready to.
So I just signed up we had a pretty good career office, and I just started interviewing with any kind of jobs that would take people with my degree, and ended up getting a job with the Travelers, and I was what was my title at the time? I can't remember.
Travelers in Hartford.
So Travelers had a national campaign for recruiting their management trainees, I guess, for lack of a better term. So I got hired through that national recruiting campaign, and they place you in an office. And the office they put me in was Morris Plains, New Jersey.
Okay.
So actually, not too bad. A little over an hour's drive from my parents, who were still in Stamford, and about 20 minutes from Newark Airport, where New York Air used to have flights. I think it was $99 round trip between Newark and Raleigh Durham. It would leave Friday afternoon,
Wow.
and they'd serve wine and cheese and crackers on the
Oh
plane.
my gosh.
So I went down to Duke a lot. It was like I had 5 years there.
Right, because Ted was still
Ted
there,
was still
and
there.
you were a couple at that point, so
Right.
you were coming down on the weekends, and then so you're where were you living? Were you living in Morris Plains?
I was living in Lake Parsippany, which is a little community of kind of a very interesting, very diverse community
Okay.
of the house that I lived in, and I found it through a classified ad with
Classified. What is that?
exactly
Right.
with two other women. One was a female bodybuilder,
Oh my gosh.
and the other was she worked for AT&T at the time.
Oh, that's so it was a big Jersey company,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, and her father had the I probably shouldn't say this in public, but he had the contract for plowing the town green in Morristown. He was a paving contractor, had a lot of interesting connections.
Like, let's say it this way, was he more organized than the government likes you to be?
Yes, he was.
Yes.
He was very organized. We ended up kicking her out of
Oh,
our
gosh.
group house because she didn't pay her rent for about 4 months, and we actually called the police for
Oh,
our
God.
protection when her family came and moved her out, and they shut off our phone service. They had our phone service shut off. So, it was back in the days before cell phones. So we were pretty nervous
Oh my
about
gosh.
the kicking her out of the house part.
Wow. So you're living there, and then at some point Ted make his way up to Jersey, or do you make your way all both to
No.
DC?
So we were engaged actually already. I got engaged really, really young, and we were planning to get married as soon as he graduated, and we actually did 6 weeks later.
Wow.
He coincidentally
and you're
got a
what?
job with Travelers
And
too.
you're 23?
Just 23.
Wow.
Just 23.
Okay.
And he was still 22.
And you said you're young and in love, and it's time to get married.
I think part of it, I mean, we knew. We just, it felt right, and we're still married decades and decades
No,
later.
I mean, sure, but you have the proof, right? I mean, it's
But also in the South, it was a little more common to get
Right.
married younger. We were actually not, I should say, we were not the first of our friends, because my roommate from my junior year in college accelerated her graduation and got married that summer after our junior year, and she was still 20 years old. And she is still married too.
wow. So where do you get married?
We got married in New Canaan, Connecticut,
Oh, okay.
at Waveney Park,
Oh, yeah.
which at the time was well known as.
Now it's even more well known, but not for
right.
good reasons.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I was just reading about it today.
Yeah.
At the time, it was known as, oh gosh, what was it called? Cortland Manor, I think,
Okay.
on All My Children.
So Waveney Park, Connecticut wedding, right? So you
Yep.
come back home, all the families here, so
Yep.
they all converge there. And then when you get married, where's the first marital home, if you will? Where do you live?
In an apartment in Alexandria, Virginia.
Oh, okay, great.
So we
An Old Town?
Alexandria City, but not
Okay.
Old Town.
Okay.
Ironically enough, right off Duke Street.
Oh, that's funny. I know Duke Street. Yes.
So we work for the Travelers in Annandale.
So Ted gets a job with the Travelers
Yep.
as well.
Different department, but yeah.
Wow. So you're down in Annandale, and so what year is that? Or what is it? Late 80s?
Mid-80s.
Mid 80s. Fine. We'll leave
Yep.
it at that. So mid 80s DC.
Yep.
Okay. And how long you remain in DC? 14 years? you said?
14 years. So
All with the Travelers?
no. Ted left first,
Okay.
and he went to work for. So he was in the life insurance marketing. He and I both had similar type jobs, but in different
He's
divisions.
a marketing guy.
He was doing marketing, really getting the Travelers agents to put their business with Travelers. That's what his
Old school marketing, because there's no internet at the time.
Oh,
There's no cell phones at the time.
No.
I mean, that's when you really had to work at that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like there's direct mail. That's really
a lot
all you
of
had.
a lot
and
of
phone calls.
personal
Yeah.
a lot of personal visits.
Relationships, right? Which is sort of the theme of my
Exactly.
podcast, right? So that's when you really had to sort of look people in the eyes, as opposed to trying to get into their logarithm on Instagram to
Mhm.
get the ads to come up and different things
Right.
like that. A little
Right.
easier. So he's doing he leaves and goes and works for a company there.
Yeah, well, so he actually left and went to work for a bank-owned insurance
Okay.
agency that was selling. So both of us ended up with our Series 6
Oh,
insurance.
you took the
Or
test for
we
the.
both took the test. Actually, he took it first. He was also Series 7 licensed. He's selling annuities and other products for
Right.
this bank-owned insurance agency, and it's just kind of at the very beginning of that industry,
Okay.
starting off. He kind of hated that job, but it was kind of fun from my standpoint because he won a bunch of awards, and we went to Palm
Oh, right.
Springs, and we got to take some fun trips. He wasn't even there for that long, but he didn't like it, but he did well at it.
Oh, I see. So he didn't like the sales aspect of it, or
He was actually, if you've ever met my
I
husband,
haven't. Yeah.
he's comes across as very quiet and low key, but he inspires a lot of trust, and he's a good salesperson. He just doesn't.
He doesn't do it. He's sort of like the introverted
Yeah,
salesperson, right? Right. You just look at him. He's steady Eddie. You could trust him. You look at him. You're like, oh, this guy's just gonna do right by me, kind of thing.
well, the summer after we started dating, so this was when I was living in DC for the summer, working on Capitol Hill as an intern. He had a job working for Southwestern Publishing Company, which is a door-to-door
Oh
book
yeah.
selling. So it's study guides. He was like fifth best in the country that summer
Wow.
and made like $10,000.
Which is like, I mean, unheard of.
And that was kind of the reason we could get married when we did too, because
He made a ton of
he
money.
bought a car. He
He's
made
the
a lot of
man.
money. Yeah. So
Wow. And so he won lots of awards. And then where did you go?
I was doing commercial lines, marketing and underwriting for Travelers also, and then I got recruited to work for Marsh and McLennan.
That's one of the big entities that was in the World Trade Center, right?
Correct.
Right.
Correct. So at the time, I was doing brokerage for international insurance, and I was actually telling somebody that this morning. One of the accounts that I worked on was an insurance program for the multinational force and observers, which I don't think it exists anymore, but it was the peacekeeping force in the Sinai.
Oh wow.
And so while I say that, I get very overwhelmed by trying to, keep up with international relations and, everything that's going on in the Middle East.
Right.
That was really kind of my first foray into really trying to understand it, because my political science degree focused on American government.
Right.
That and state and urban finance. Like it very much ties into what I do now.
Right.
But I was not, other than a couple courses, not really an international relations person.
So does that continue all the way through the end of your tenure in DC?
No, not at all.
Oh, so what happened?
So I did international insurance, and then I did actually, and this is the forefront of pollution insurance.
Oh, interesting.
It was really just like RCRA was just passed, and all of the insurance companies trying to figure out what their liability was for brownfields. And,
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was,
Superfund sites and all
right.
that, yeah.
It was really the kind of birth of that industry. But then I left Marsh and McLennan and got recruited to work at Johnson and Higgins, which was a direct competitor. And that was, so our traveler's office was Annandale, Virginia. I was in DC at Marsh and McLennan, then at Johnson and Higgins, and then while I was still at Johnson and Higgins, they got bought by Marsh and McLennan.
Oh,
so I was back back at Marsh again for just the last year that I was there.
Right.
But I went from when I went to Johnson and Higgins, I was a broker for middle market. So just more your, mid-sized companies.
Mm-hmm.
And then I became a client executive, which was really kind of like the coveted job in the office, at least from my standpoint. So I managed client teams. And so I managed the broker who, it was a very much a matrix type organization. So they didn't report to me except for whatever team I happened to be managing. But I headed up our government group, which was really pretty interesting clients that I worked with in DC. So Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Sallie Mae, the FDIC,
huge
World Bank, the International Monetary
IMF,
Fund.
yeah.
Those were all clients of ours and clients that I worked on when I was there.
Wow, that's a great experience.
It
Because
was,
DC
yeah.
is a very interesting place because I found, at least I was in college there from 93 to 97. So that's still when you wouldn't go past 14th Street
I
unless
worked
you
at
were
the
in a
corner
cab.
of 14th and I,
Oh yeah, yeah.
believe it or not,
Oof.
and I only went in one
Yeah, one
direction.
direction. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And if you were going to Union Station, you'd take a cab. Like you
Hmm.
wouldn't get out. And that's when like the FBI in that area there, you'd get out and there's peep shows, all kinds of
Oh yeah.
seedy stuff. Now it's all completely gentrified, and you can go 30 or 40 blocks past the Capitol, and it's beautiful. I mean, you'd walk past the Capitol a block, and you could be very dangerous.
Oh
Now
yeah.
it's there's all kinds of growth and multi-million-dollar condos and development. It's
The summer that I lived in DC when I was an intern, I lived at 6th and East Capitol.
oh gosh.
And it was a pretty interesting
Yeah,
neighborhood.
now it's beautiful. But I
Yeah.
was just down there recently, and we stayed at a hotel that was on the wharf. You know about this, the wharf? That's the old Navy Yard,
Oh, yeah.
which was, on the way to Anacostia. And, but I got stuck there one time. I went to a rave with somebody, and I couldn't even get a cab to come get me, and there's no cell phone. And now that area is, there's a Bar Taco on the water. There's, beautiful hotels, like there's a Ritz or something down there. It's beautiful. And that's where the Nationals play down there. So it was nice. So any kids at that point in DC?
Yes, so my daughter was born at Alexandria Hospital.
Oh.
She was born in 1995. She's about to turn, yikes, 29.
Wow.
So for the longest time when we moved here, she said, I'm from the South.
She's from south of the Mason-Dixon line.
That's right. That's right.
Wow. So she was born there, and then you have 2 children, right?
I do. So I was pregnant with my son, who is 25. He'll be 26 in May
Okay.
when we moved
And
here.
he's but he was born here.
Yes, he was born.
So it goes DC to Connecticut, back to Connecticut.
Correct.
Okay. And where do you work when you land in Connecticut?
So, like as I said, so I had had my daughter. I went back to work. For the privilege of keeping all my clients, I got to work just 3 days technically in the office. I was really there 4 days, and got to have my salary cut, but didn't have to give up any of my clients. How about that?
Wow.
So this is kind
Pre-work
of
from home.
well, yeah. Actually, I had a cell phone by then, and
Oh yeah, I guess that's right. They were in the 90s. They were.
I had a Sprint PCS phone.
I remember Sprint PCS, and you could do that weird. They had you could send weird messages on that thing.
Yeah.
You remember that thing?
Yeah. Wow.
Sprint, and it
Yeah.
was like a square phone. I had that phone. Sprint was like DC was their main spot, so Sprint had the best coverage there.
I also had a car phone, so I had 2 phones.
I love that. Did you ever
car phone with the little wiggly antenna?
I worked for a place that was supporting Fannie Mae for a while up in Northwest DC because I lived in Upper Massachusetts Avenue near AU, and I worked there part time. And they gave me a pager, but it was one of the ones that was alphanumeric. So you call an operator and say, "Hi, Ronnie, meet me at 5:00." They would type it in, and then you'd get it. And it was like the best technology. It was like, and of course, then all of my drunk friends would call at like 2 a.m. and leave the most disgusting message. And then you'd get these things and be like, "Oh my God, you had to like say that to a person who had to type it in." So you had all of that, and then so where do you guys move? Do you move right to West Hartford?
We did. We moved to the house that we still live in
97?
West Hartford, 1998,
Okay.
and we made the decision at the end of 1997 that actually probably in the fall of 97 we'd come up to visit our family. So my husband by then was working for, it's FINRA now, but at the time the National Association of Securities Dealers. He was in advertising compliance. Loved his job. Didn't really see a path to advancing in that company. And in fact, I think just the last year or two, his former boss retired, still in the position that he'd been in back in the 1990s. So had Ted stayed there, he
would have
I don't know what he would have done.
not advanced. So, all right. So, does he continue to work for FINRA here?
No. So he, looking at kind of what his body of expertise was, he knew that there were good jobs, mostly in big cities, and he's never been a big fan of New York, and just was testing the waters, looking at other opportunities. When the opportunity with MassMutual came up, they kind of created a job that matched his skill set perfectly. He's calling me right now. I'm going to send him right to voicemail. Sorry about that,
He's getting the forward to voicemail. What's up, Ted?
So he must have heard me talking about him. So Mass Mutual kind of creates this new advertising regulation position. He worked for the insurance company and also their broker-dealer. At the time, Mass Mutual also had a Hartford office, so he split his time between Hartford and Springfield.
Springfield, right.
So he gets this job offer. We decide, my family's still in Stamford at the time. My sister was living in New York. We have one child. We're about to have a second. His parents are still here in West Hartford. His family has this house in Nantucket that we like spending.
Oh, that's right. You're right. I always
spending
see you
time.
post about Nantucket.
Yeah.
That's so funny. I was just thinking, if Ted has Find My iPhone or Track My Friends, he probably sees you at a divorce lawyer's office and he's freaking out.
Oh no, he did know. Well, I think
did
he
you
knew.
tell him?
I think
Okay.
he knew I was.
Did you tell him I
coming
wear
here.
2 hats? Because he could track it. He's like, oh my God, she's at the lawyer's office. This is it.
I'll be sure to tell him where.
Oh my gosh, that'd be funny. He's like, I just saw you there. I want to talk you out of it. Oh my gosh. All right, so he goes to Mass Mutual, and then
So we house hunted. We never thought we'd move to West Hartford, actually, because his parents lived here. We thought, we'll look at Farmington, Simsbury, Avon. Nothing on the other side of the river, because being from West Hartford, you
never go east of the river.
You couldn't live east of
right,
the river.
It's like the world is flat and it drops off at east
right.
of the river. What's that?
So the very first house that we looked at, and we found it on the internet back then.
Oh, that's right. That was just coming of age. Then.
So, Advancement was the house that we actually ended up buying. We thought it needed some love, but the bones of it were beautiful. I still love my house. It was a Tudor house, and even as a kid, my grandparents lived in New Rochelle, and I love Tudor architecture.
Oh, that's right. New Rochelle has a ton of those. Yeah. So you're there, and you raise your family there.
So I ended up leaving my job because Marsh & McLennan was, still working out the final parts of its merger with Johnson & Higgins. I asked for a transfer to the Hartford office. They said, we have too many client executives with the merged company. You could go back to being a broker. And I thought, you know what? I'm good. I'm gonna take some time off. And I called it a sabbatical that lasted forever. I just never really wanted to go back to doing that. It was interesting. It paid well. I met a lot of great people. I learned a lot, but I just didn't have the passion for it. And it was also not family friendly.
So did you then stay? Were you stay-at-home mom at that point?
Yeah, I was.
And so you stay-at-home mom for the kids. For how many years did you take that all the way through high school?
Oh, no.
Just a few years?
So totally doing no work at all, maybe for, my son was born 4 weeks early. So, we had some issues with, he was in NICU for a little while. So I wanted to stay home with him for a while. So he was maybe a year old, maybe a little more than that, when I started freelance writing.
Oh, so that's when the writing comes back.
That's when it, yeah.
So almost 20 years probably since that you had that last reporting job at Duke.
Gosh, let's see. So that would have...
I think you in your late 30s?
15 years.
15?
So yeah, I was 36 when he was born,
Okay.
so 37.
So freelance writing, who do you write for?
West Hartford News.
Oh, interesting. And who founded that?
Gosh, I don't know. West Hartford News has been around for...
Is it still around?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a Hearst paper now.
Oh.
So at the time, I think it was owned by Imprint.
Oh, I see. But it's an actual physical...
It's a
old
physical
school paper.
weekly paper.
Wow.
Back in the day, we had our wedding announcement in there. It was very much, hyper local news, and very a thick paper once a week. A lot of advertisers.
And so what kind of gigs would they send you on?
So I didn't even plan to do it. One of my neighbors at the time was a photographer, and she was taking pictures for the West Hartford News. And I just happened to ask her, do they ever need writers? And she said, oh gosh, I hope they never find out that I minored in journalism because I hate to write. And I said, oh, well, I kind of like it. That might be fun. I was trying to figure out, what my next move would be. And so she tells the editor, who then assigns me a story without ever asking for any writing samples or anything.
Well, I guess the worst you could do is just not have a workable story, right?
Well, so one of my very first stories was interviewing Leon Davidoff, actually, who at the time, is now our West Hartford town clerk, spent many, many years on the town council. At the time, this was it was actually for the Newington Town Crier, which was same company as the West Hartford News. He was just named or he was the president of the Newington Chamber of Commerce.
Wow.
So I interviewed him about that, and he and I both still remember that. And then I think I wrote about just some event. It was all, feature stuff, and every now and then they'd send me to cover a town council story.
So and so how many years do you do that?
Probably 2 years or so.
Okay.
It paid like nothing. I mean,
Right.
it cost me to do those stories. I think I earned like $20 a story.
Oh gosh.
It was, I mean, really, it was.
All
But I
right.
built a portfolio.
And then what happens after that?
Then I moved into doing features writing for lifestyle magazines. So I started writing for Living in West Hartford.
Oh yeah.
And then I did some writing for Hartford Magazine and
Oh,
Home Living
wow.
Connecticut, and a couple other.
And you're an independent contractor at that point,
Correct.
right? You're 1099. They just send you out.
Yep.
You do your thing, and your name gets out there as somebody who can write. And you could just tell her what you want, and then say, "I need it by Friday." You deliver it,
Right.
and it's ready to go.
And then I ended up editor of Living in West Hartford. And
That's
then I
still
ended
around,
up
isn't
editor
it?
of, well, now it's West Hartford Magazine.
All right, but isn't that the magazine that they always try to sell me stuff, but they advertising, but it's only people west of Mountain Road.
No,
But
it's
what's
not that
that
one. It's not
place?
that one. That one actually is defunct now.
Oh, it
It's
is?
called Life on the Mountain.
Oh, it's a good thing I didn't advertise in there because they were trying to sell me like, oh, it's exclusive advertising or something. Okay, so this is so the West Hartford is still the other one is still around.
It's morphed into something different, but it still exists. It's an online only
So
publication.
totally
right now.
freelance, and then you just continue doing that until you decide to do your own thing, or
So I ended up being editor for
Right.
I think it was 8 years or so that I was editor of Living
so
in
are
West
you still
Hartford.
writing, or are you just editing at that point?
No, writing and editing. I mean, the editor title when you're working for a small
Right, you're doing all
company,
the yeah.
you're writing a lot.
Right, and you're
hope
changing the
somebody else
water at
reads
the
it.
cooler, and you're doing all that stuff.
Right.
Right, so you're doing that, and so so the listeners know obviously that you are the founder, right, of weha.com?
Yes. Yeah.
And
One of the founders.
One of the founders. Who did you found it with?
I founded it with so Tom Hickey, who was who was the publisher of Living in West Hartford, but he and I had a breakup for a while.
Okay.
He, Bob Carr, who's our business manager, and Kosik Makati, who is our sales director, who was our sales director for Patch, which is where I worked in between Living in West Hartford.
Because Patch is the hyper local news that's across the country, right? It's you can
Right. So I decided I needed a change for a variety of reasons, and I left. I actually tried to leave for a couple of years, but finally left Living in West Hartford. And then I ended up getting a job working for Patch that was just starting off in this market. And I helped build their business directory. And then I did a weekly column called, what was it called? About Town. And then the editor got a promotion and I became the local editor of Patch. And they really had to talk me into this. And it was my first return to really full-time work since I lived here. And it was, we called it kind of the great experiment. So I get hired. AOL owned Patch at the time.
Yeah, well.
They bring us to New York. First of all, I had to get hired, I had to take this test. And it was, and I had not been a hardcore news person. I was really a features person. But this was a test to, do you understand libel and slander? They gave you a scenario and you had to write it. You had like 5 minutes literally to write a story, send a tweet, and do a Facebook post. Just
to see kind of.
And then they kept giving you a little bit more information, and you had to go back and revise and send out more tweets and send out, write more Facebook posts. And it had to do with the fire, and it had to do with, information from witnesses on the scene. And did you understand which, who said something that you could actually report on? So I guess I passed. But it was so stressful. I mean, I had my glass of water there. I made sure I went to the bathroom before it started because you had a limited amount of time and you had to finish this whole project during that time. So I ended up getting this job with Patch, and I went to New York for the training, and they hand me a briefcase, like a canvas briefcase. It had a MacBook, an iPhone, and this was in why can't I remember? 2011. So iPhone 4 and a hotspot so that you could be connected anywhere, a digital camera with a flash drive, and a tripod. And that was pretty much, that was your office to go. And I'd never used a Mac before either. I was a hardcore PC person, so it was definitely a learning curve. Most of the people who were the editors were right out of college, maybe a year or two out of college. I remember in our one of our icebreakers in our training, they said, what's the weirdest song you have on your iPod? And what's the first movie you saw? And my first movie was The Sound of Music. So I really gave away my age and my song on my iPod at the time, because that's what you had, was play that funky music.
Oh, I remember that song. Yeah.
Most people had never even heard of it. So, but anyway, it was a great learning experience. I learned to do video. I learned to do social media. I learned how to write, although I don't write as fast as a lot of people do. I learned how to just put together like the police story I was working on today. I can pretty much turn those out pretty quickly. Yeah.
So when did you officially found weha.com?
2014.
2014. And it's all things West Hartford, correct?
It is.
Nothing else.
Nothing else, really. I mean, occasionally the parts of Farmington or parts of Hartford that are, across the street.
Yeah, we live right near the mall, so we're always like, I can throw a rock into West Hartford, so we pay the Farmington taxes.
I do cover West Farms. I count West Farms.
Oh, West Farms. Yeah, we're sort of West Farms area.
No matter if it's stores in West Hartford or in
we
Farmington,
live right near
it
the
doesn't
Wendy's,
matter.
kind of over there. So, all right. So how many people do you have on staff now?
So we have me.
Yeah.
And we have a part-time sports reporter. Anybody who works for us is paid as a freelancer,
right?
Though.
Okay.
So no one's actually like
no. But I mean, like how many how many people do stuff for you?
So we have an IT person.
Wow.
We have a sales director. We have a business manager, and then we have me.
That's incredible.
And we have interns in the summer usually, and we have Paul, our sports reporter. We have other people who contribute, like Craig Rosenberg is an incredible photographer. He provides us with a lot of photos. We do accept submitted content, so I will publish press releases from various nonprofits and Kingswood or some of the other.
And is it is it run out of your house, or do you have some space, or?
We don't have space. So because of the relationship with Tom Hickey, who's also all along been the publisher of, he's now also the publisher of or involved with the Jewish Ledger. He was always the publisher of West Hartford Magazine. So, and as one of our owners, we shared space with him at one point over by where Uberdrug is now.
Oh yeah,
on Talcott Road. But really, I've worked at home since long before anybody worked at home.
The old
Patch
school.
didn't have offices either.
Right.
And I used to be on a conference call and I'd be putting my laundry in the dryer, or the dog would be barking. And
you were like the OG work from home.
Right.
Because now everyone does it. I can't. I'm not a work from home. I have young kids, so you can't work from home. It's impossible. So how big is West Hartford?
64,000 people.
64,000 people. So you're in that, and how many square miles? Do you know?
Oh gosh.
I'm not testing you. I don't know.
Yeah, no, 28 maybe, something like that.
Okay.
217 miles of roadway.
217 miles of roadway, and so the
16 schools.
16. Wow, you know a lot. So 16 schools. Public schools, and then there's some private schools.
Yeah.
Right. And how many temples? There's a lot of synagogues, right?
Oh,
it's probably several synagogues and churches.
Yep.
What is if you had to describe, I relocated here from DC, right? I left DC in '97 and came to law school at UConn, and I grew up in the New Haven area. and then I lived in Hartford, and then ultimately moved to Farmington, and then made my office here. And so obviously, I love West Hartford. It's a great town, and there's different views on like if you had to describe West Hartford, how would you like how would you describe West Hartford to somebody if I came here from Raleigh, Durham, and somebody said I want to come to see something in Connecticut. What do you tell me about the town you live in? What would you tell them?
Wow, that's an interesting question. So, one of the reasons why I always thought hyperlocal news would work in West Hartford is because West Hartford loves itself, and I mean that with all due respect and kindness.
Well, you should love yourself, right?
Right, right. So I think there's a lot of town pride, and the town had a tagline. They don't use it anymore. Where village charm meets city. I can't even remember exactly what it was. And they gave up on that, but I really kind of liked it because I thought it was accurate. So it's a small town, but it's not technically a city, but it has a lot of what you would look to a city to offer. It has great restaurants, definitely.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And there's a lot of opportunity. And there's offices. It's such a great walkable downtown, but it's very at the same time kind of incestuous. Everybody knows each other's business.
Oh, is that true? Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
A lot of gossip.
Not really gossipy, but there's so many interrelationships. It's like a half degree of separation. You could go anywhere in the world and find someone who knows your next door neighbor, and that it's just the West Hartford just has this broadness about it where people know each other.
There's also I've
business.
also experienced some little cattiness with them. I was at a party and somebody said, "Oh, I live on Crestwood," and then the person I'll never forget this looked at him and said, "Upper Crestwood or Lower Crestwood?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you got to be kidding me!" I'm like, "What is this?"
Well, I'm going to laugh about that because I live on Upper Rumford. So Crestwood is one street over.
No, but it was just a kind of a funny thing. I was like, oh, okay, like, but that happens everywhere, though. I mean, that could be just a side. But I was just like, oh my god, that's so funny. So
there's a couple streets that are divided by Webster Hill Boulevard.
No, yeah.
And we don't. I mean, I actually don't really know that many people on the other side of Webster Hill Boulevard because it's kind of a busy street and it's hard to cross.
Right.
So when your kids are little, you're probably not going across that street that often unless you really have reason. Plus, there's a big hill. So, I run up and down those hills, but they're really pretty steep.
So as a reporter now, a full-fledged reporter for a town of 60-something thousand, one of the things I like to talk about is like the name of my podcast is I'll Call My Guy. So I talk about relationships and again, my strong view is that if I'm giving advice to somebody or whatever it is, and I want to talk about how that impacts your business, how relationships are, to me, I always tell my kids they're everything.
Absolutely.
Absolutely everything. Yeah. Because as a reporter, like even I've worked on some high profile cases too, and I've made contacts with reporters, right? And they establish relationships with me. And so when I need something in the future, or they need something from me, they call me. They're like, "Hey, do you know anybody that can do this?" Or do you know? Or I call them and I'm like, "Who's the person I need to talk to about this?" And those relationships, then, because you're giving them some information, because you are looking for a scoop, or you're looking for what happened here. You need to talk to the beat officer, or that you want to text the chief of police, because your information is your gold, right? You're mining that gold. So could you talk a little bit about the importance of fostering those relationships and how you foster those relationships in order to be a good reporter?
So it's really something I learned at a very early age from, as I said, my dad was in the human resources personnel business. So it was something that he taught us. When I was a kid, I learned how to shake hands and I learned how to network, and kind of everything I've done has had an element of that in it. It was almost all like training for this day. Even being in a sorority in
What
college.
sorority, by the way?
AOPI.
Oh, okay.
Being, doing marketing work for the travelers, it was building the relationships with those agents so that they'd want to throw their business our way. As a client executive, it was a sales and relationship management job. And I also did a lot of writing because I constantly responded to RFPs. And when I wasn't really working full time, I was PTO president. I was on the board of the West Hartford Women's Soccer Association. I was on the board of the preschool my kids went to. So I was always very involved in the community and kind of built a network. And my mother-in-law also used to run the seniors job bank. She was the first executive director of the job bank here in West Hartford. So she knew a lot of people. I met a lot of people through her, the people in town government. I've always felt like it's really important to be present at events. So sometimes I go to things on background just to understand and to meet the players and to really understand the players. Like, don't throw me into, XYZ town in the middle of Pennsylvania and expect me to do this job because I don't know anybody there. So, but here, almost 26 years.
Right. You know who to call, you know who you can trust.
I, probably can recite town code to you. And
right. But how is it's also, I know with reporters that I've dealt with too, like when you're talking to somebody and I have a bunch of media experience, I always say to them, this is background, right? Mm-hmm. And I know that with a reporter, that reporter's bond has to be everything, right? Because if you say to the person, this is background only, and for the people listening that don't know, background means you're not going to attribute a quote, you're not going to say, a source close to somebody said, it's merely to just inform you to help lead your investigation, right? So I'm giving you, hey, look, I heard this, this, and this, Ronni, you should go check this out. I don't want anything to do with this. If the reporter promises you that anonymity on background, the reporter has to agree to that and take it to their grave, right? I mean, that's a critical element of journalism.
I say it's a blood oath, really.
It's a blood oath, right? And if you were subpoenaed, you wouldn't answer. You'd go sit in jail. Right. I mean, it's that sacred. It's as sacred as the privilege between a priest and a parishioner. Right. I mean,
and actually, and one of the things you see today is you see a lot of people. I'll put it in quotes as pretending to be reporters. Mm-hmm. A lot of people sharing, again in quotes, news that isn't really, it's not truly news. Like today, I didn't really want to write anything about this police incident that I was reporting on right before I came here until I got the information from the police department, because I'm not sure what the real deal is.
Right, you hear stuff like I've texted you stuff before, like I heard this, and that's just it gives you a roadmap. Like, okay, maybe I'll call here now because that's another piece, but you can't report on it because that's not sourced, right? It's not for attribution,
right? And people do tend to think that they're bringing people the information they want and reporting on rumors. And that's, so I've worked very hard to be trusted in the community. And after almost 10 years of running this site, I think people know that I'm not going to be reporting on something unless I'm quite positive that it's the truth. And I mean, of course I'll make mistakes, but I'll admit them.
Right. So how do you, as the reporter, and obviously you've built a ton of relationships just being a mom in town and a businesswoman in town, but now as the primary reporter and editor of WeHa, how do you foster those relationships, for instance, with, town council members, police, those kind of folks?
So I meet people for coffee a lot and just try to get to know people, just to, know who they are and where they're from and assure them that I'm going to be objective. I think the results of, I have a huge body of work, thousands and thousands of articles that I've produced over the years. I think for the most part, people believe that it's objective and fair, and that what I continue to do will be objective and fair. And I, try to really get to know people.
Right. Does WeHa.com have an editorial page or opinion page?
We publish op-eds, usually submitted from the community. Okay. I had one the other day from actually a Hall High School junior who wrote about the challenges of walking and sidewalks and crosswalks, the safety of walking in West Hartford.
Which has been a huge issue in the last couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
Even recently, somebody was killed.
Yep.
On Albany Avenue.
Yeah.
So
but not like an opinion. Like I don't usually write op-eds, with the exception of the introduction to my Business Buzz column, which is always in first person.
Right. So you don't have like the Wall Street Journal has a very political editorial page made up of folks that weigh in on politics.
Yeah, no,
you stay out of that.
I try to stay out of that.
Right.
I will publish op-eds that have opinions, but for the most part, people don't submit pieces that are highly controversial.
Right, because I've seen some stuff I've on Twitter. I don't post anything, but I use Twitter to look at information, and I see that there's, West Hartford's traditionally a Democratic town, but there's some really sort of I don't know, I'll call it interesting posts from the West Hartford Republicans. I don't know who they are, but they would be interesting to see if they would submit op-ed stuff, because the stuff on Twitter seemed very like I don't know, I wouldn't say avant-garde, but very provocative.
Yeah, they're definitely people on all sides of the political spectrum who have very strong opinions about issues.
That's right. And West Hartford is no exception to that.
Right.
All right. And then just a few more things. So in terms of the police, what kind of stuff do you see the police handling here? Is it does it have the same sort of issues that a big city has?
To some extent, yes. I mean, we've got, domestic issues. They're just today shot fired in a convenience store. We've had armed robberies. We've had murders, and definitely we've had, we had this protest that turned into an issue of vandalism.
Oh, I saw that. It was terrible.
And I did a follow up to that actually this morning before I was late for my first meeting, because I had to get the story out before I could leave and go on to the next day.
Did they arrest anybody for that yet?
They have not arrested anyone yet. There's pretty good surveillance video of it. But if you don't, as you probably know, if you don't arrest somebody right there at the scene,
you got to get a warrant.
You got to get a warrant. So they're working on that now.
Oh, good. Yeah, because it seemed like that was just random vandalism, wasn't it? It was like
no. The police are pretty sure it was planned, and that it was planned so that the perpetrators shielded the people who were actually throwing the paint on the window, shielded them from view of the police.
And was it tied to Becker's, or was it, or
no?
Just, they just wanted to...
tied. No, but it was tied to another business in that building.
Oh, that's terrible.
That is, and I'm not sure whether or not this is the case, but apparently they are an investor in an Israeli defense manufacturing company. But nothing to do with Becker's or Webster Bank, other than the fact that they happen to be the storefronts.
The anchor stores there. Oh my gosh. All right. And so then in terms of then how you get your stories, could you just talk a little bit about that, and then we can wind down?
Yeah. So there's no one way. It's really, I get my information sometimes from social media, sometimes from a phone call, sometimes a text, sometimes an email, sometimes, gosh, I don't know.
Are you a person that sleeps with your phone, because the information just, you need to have it?
Yeah. So I got woken up this morning by my watch and my phone. My phone's on silent most of the time, but my watch was buzzing because schools were delayed.
Oh, so you have to do a story on that.
So, well, I kind of went back to sleep for a while and then woke up. It was about, I don't know, by that point, like 5 of 6, and I just sent out a quick tweet.
On it. And then what is Ted still working?
Oh yeah.
And where is he now? Is he still at Mass Mutual?
Still at Mass Mutual. He just had his 26th anniversary just this past week.
And he's at Springfield. He commutes.
He's now back in Springfield 3 days a week.
Okay, so he's still there.
He worked from home for more than 2 years without even setting foot in his office. Wow. It was like stepping back into like a Rip Van Winkle situation. Right. His 2020 calendar was hanging on the wall.
And then the kids are out of the house?
They are both out of the house. My daughter still lives in West Hartford. She's married and has...
That's right, I saw she got married.
Has a baby.
Oh my gosh, you're a grandma now.
And yeah, she is a physical therapist, assistant director at PTSMC right at the corner of South Main and Sedgwick.
Oh yeah.
And lives here in West Hartford. Her husband's from West Hartford.
Oh my gosh. So there you go.
His parents are from West Hartford.
Oh my gosh. So is he a Hall or Connard or KO?
He's Connard.
Okay. My wife's Connard.
The two of them are both Connard. And
okay.
And his parents are Connard too.
And you're a doggy mommy as well, right?
Dog mom, yeah. And my son, who also went to Connard, actually both my kids went to UConn, both got 2 degrees at UConn. And my son lives in Boston. He's an economist
Oh,
in Boston
wow.
now.
So right, so and so obviously you're a close-knit family. They come home all the time. I see you posting on that, and so this town is done means a lot to you, right? I mean, it's a wonderful place in my view to raise a family. You've obviously been very successful at it, and I think that my observations of you is that this is a labor of love as well. I mean, it's a fun town. It's a nice town. There seems to be a camaraderie in the town. There's like a village type atmosphere. People want to live a good life, and I think the prices of the homes reflect that. Right, the real estate is very strong
Oh
here.
yeah.
The schools are very strong, and it's a sort of a good place to live and raise your family.
It absolutely is. When we first moved here, first of all, I thought the home prices were so inexpensive
Right.
coming from Falls Church, Virginia, is where we were living. And, but it really, I mean, just for the same reason why you wanted to have, a storefront type
Right.
business. It's a really good family town. The schools are great. There's so many opportunities. My kids were both very involved in sports and other music, the arts. My daughter was in the play at Sedgwick,
Oh, that's so nice.
and they both got a really good background for kind of how to go out and live in the world. It's a great community, but it's also not. It's diverse, so they weren't coming from this kind of like sheltered little small town life where they never met anybody different from them. They did get to know a lot of different types of people through the schools they went to, and I think that's really good preparation for life. I've grown to really love this town. I loved it from the first time I saw it when I came to visit my
When the
then
center was nothing
boyfriend.
like it was then in the '90s, it was
Right,
nothing. It was
right.
so the name of my to wrap up the name of my podcast is I'll Call My Guy, and of course, guy is gender
Mhm.
neutral. That's sort of it could be your because I'd consider you one of my guys. Like in other words,
All
somebody
right.
said, "Who would I call?" I'd say, "Well, call Ronnie because Ronnie's my guy. Like she knows how to fix this or she knows who to talk to." So my question for you is, other than Ted, um, who would be one of your guys?
Oh, one of my guys. Gosh. Well, it really depends on what I
What? All
need.
right, fair enough.
Yeah,
But
I'm going to be
for
fair.
like a couple of your guys, who like a couple of your guys, you say, something in town. Who's your guy?
Well, I might call the
The
mayor.
mayor, Sherry.
I would definitely call Sherry. Talk to Sherry this
Okay.
morning. Um, I texted with the police chief earlier today. The town manager. I've known him.
All the
Our
leaders
kids
in
were at
town.
Connor together,
Right.
so I've known him for a long time. So I wouldn't hesitate to reach out to him. I see Billy Grant's one of your coming up
Yes, Billy
guests,
is.
so
Oh, he's one of my guys too. Like I
he's
mean,
he's my guy too.
right?
He called me to let me know that he was going to be closing
Oh,
down for a
correct.
few
To
weeks for
renovation, right?
renovations to make sure that the right story was out
Right. Not
there.
that they're having trouble. I mean, that place is sold out every night.
Right, right,
Yes. As opposed to those other stories where you're like, they put up a sign like temporarily closed. It's curtains
right,
for the
right.
restaurant. Nobody wants to admit that. Well, Ronnie, thank you so much. I thought it was very important to learn about how you got to where you are. Your work is great. You're such an advocate for the town. And I wanted folks to learn a little bit about the background, how you got here, how you learned to be a reporter, how you built those relationships, and what you think of the town. So thank you for your time.
Well, Rich, thank you so much for having me.
You're
Sorry, I
welcome.
probably talked your ear
No,
off.
I loved it. I loved learning about you and that we were living in DC at the same time.
Yeah, that's great. We'll have to talk more about that
Yeah. All right.
offline.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye bye.